Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this session of D Talks or Disruptive Literacy Talks. Good morning to the ones who are joining us from the western part of the world. When we are talking about foundational literacy and numeracy, and going forward in this endeavor to achieve the SDG 4 goals of having a literate world, it's very important to think of ideas, think of interventions that have worked in different contexts and are also disruptive in its sense. And when we are talking about these ideas, one really has to think out of the box and go beyond the traditional ways in which we do transact literacy and numeracy, not just inside the class, but also going outside the class as well. And one such great initiative, which has been leading change in the area of reading and literacy, is Nalibali. It is an organization which is based in South Africa and has been leading a movement of developing the culture of reading, writing, and sharing stories in all South African languages as well. And to help us understand the work of Nalibali, also to share some ideas as to how a movement for reading can be implemented successfully and also sustained over time, and maybe also be replicated in different countries. We have a very special guest from South Africa. She is Miss Katie Houston, the Chief Operating Officer at the Nalibali campaign. And she's going to present on today's topic, which is the Nalibali Reading Supplement, a very innovative initiative, and how it has been creating a disruptive, innovative movement in foundational literacy. Katie, it's an absolute honor here. Thank you so much for your time and joining us for this session.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to share a bit more about what we're doing and hopefully share some ideas that might be useful. I'm going to pull up my presentation now.
Yes. For all those who are joining us live, we would like to share that Katie has a presentation for us. What we would encourage all of you to do is to share your questions on chat as well. And we'll be taking some of these questions after the presentation.
Great. I'm just having a little bit of trouble. This worked perfectly before the session. So I'm going to try share my entire screen because it's not allowing me to share a window. And then I'm going to just switch to the presentation. So please let me know if this works.
Sure.
It is not allowing me to share. It worked perfectly beforehand. Let me just cancel that and try again. All right.
So meanwhile, while Katie uses the presentation, we would like to also share with our viewers that Nalibali has been working in South Africa for foundational literacy, and it brings out a very interesting supplement, kind of a newsletter where children are provided the access to these supplements in their own different languages, and also they are also able to add content to it as well in the very contextualized setting. So, Katie, I think your presentation is up here now.
Is it showing? I'm just trying to get into a presentation mode. I don't know why this is causing me trouble. It worked perfectly 5 minutes ago.
So we can see the presentation.
It's quite small, though. Is it small with things along the side and the notes?
Yes.
So that's not going to work.
Do you want to try a slideshow? Do you want to try a slideshow there?
Sorry, give me one more. I am trying. I'm so sorry about that. Try one more time. Would you mind if I just disconnect and try dial in again? This really is not happening for me right now.
Sure. Okay. No issues.
I'll join you in just a second.
So we'll have Katie join us back. Right. So, just to share a bit more about what we are going to discuss today, uh, we're going to talk about Nalibali, which has a campaign. Nalibali actually, in its native tongue, native language, refers to a national reading for enjoyment campaign, and it has a lot of interesting materials. For example, reading materials, radio stories, training and support clubs, media and campaigns as well. So this is something which Katie is going to elaborate more about. What she's also going to share is what are some of the global best practices in terms the of creating a reading culture. Uh, she's also going to give us a snapshot about South African reading culture as well, and of course the various challenges which COVID has caused to the foundational literacy and numeracy of children. Interestingly, Nalibali also has a story corner in which children can read in their own language. They can choose a book, uh, something which something to keep them active. They can get news from the networks. So a lot of interesting ideas which Katie will be sharing with us. I think we have Katie back here. Yeah.
All right,
If
it
you would
looks like
like,
it might be working now. Thank you.
yeah, sure. Just in case you face any other challenges, I'll be happy to share my screen as well, as the last resort. I know that Katie is very particular about managing her own PowerPoint, but yeah, it's out there. And okay, Katie, the stage is yours.
Are we good? Brilliant. So sorry for the
Yes,
technical
yes.
difficulties. I guess we are all a little bit more tolerant of them than we used to be a year ago. But thanks again for having me. And I guess you've already introduced me, but I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Nalibali campaign in South Africa. And I've been involved with this campaign for the last 7.5 years. And it's been such an exciting movement to be part of growing and building. So very happy to be here and share a little bit about it today. I think just to quickly go through what I'm hoping to share today, quickly just very briefly setting the stage about why we need really affordable reading materials and more disruptive models and approaches to much more rapidly meet the need that is out there. We can't just wait for every child to have books and every community to have libraries, but we need to act quickly at scale to get reading materials into homes. I want to spend a bit of time unpacking the Nalibali supplement. What is inside and why? What is the thinking behind the way we've structured it? What function do the different pieces serve? And what are we learning about how that's working? I'll quickly share a bit about what we've learned through some evaluations, as well as our own experience over the last 9 years that we've been publishing the supplement, and what we're doing about that, how we're applying those learnings. And finally, the detox team had asked me to share a few thoughts about replication. So what would it take to take this idea and adapt it to a different context? What kind of things do people need to consider if this is a solution that might be useful in other places outside of South Africa? And what I will say is when we won an award for this supplement at the African Union's Education Innovation Expo about 3 years ago. And everybody there was like, when are you coming to Kenya? When are you coming to Senegal? So that we have seen a lot of excitement and demand for this in other countries and think it could work quite well. But just to briefly say that today I'll really just be talking about one thing that Nalibali does, which is our Reading for Enjoyment newspaper supplement, but we do a lot of other things. So we're a national campaign we've been running for more than 9 years. We try to get lots of reading materials and stories out there, and to do this at sort of a mass scale. So distributing reading materials across the country in all 11 official languages, as well as airing radio stories in all 11 official languages on our public broadcaster, and working with community stations as well to further expand that reach. We do a lot of training and support to NGOs, organizations, library systems, schools that would like to start reading clubs or to bring reading for enjoyment practices and activities into their daily program, their literacy time, or into their home. We also work with parents and caregivers. And we do a lot of media, mass media campaigns, calls to action. We run World Read Aloud Day in South Africa. This year, we mobilized people to read to 3 million children on the day. And we also do lots of trying to just make reading cool and aspirational and attractive in the eyes of people so that it becomes on people's radar and something really appealing, which is going to make people more likely to take that next step to find reading material to read aloud. And we are a campaign that's really targeting the whole reading ecosystem. So a lot of education interventions trying to improve foundational literacy are really focused on teaching and learning in the classroom, which is incredibly important. Our role and mandate as a campaign is we're actually more of a behavior change campaign focused on the practices and attitudes and behaviors that prepare a child to learn when they get to the classroom, that motivate them to learn, and also the enabling conditions, readily accessible reading materials everywhere that are high quality, that are in African languages, which are going to set children up to be more likely to succeed once they get to the classroom. So we do work with teachers who want to include reading for enjoyment practices, but we're not really focused on curriculum or curriculum delivery. We're focused on all the extracurricular things, including, all the way from birth, starting from a very young age, and really focusing on what happens in the home and in communities. So that's Nalibali. And from here on out, I'll just be talking about the specific innovation I want to share today, which is our reading supplement. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I'm guessing that the challenges in India are reasonably similar, but we do have a big challenge around reading culture in South Africa. One of the things we look at as a benchmark, there's a lot of research done by Evans and her research team over the last decade showing that a minimum of 20 books in a home can have a really positive association with educational attainment and achievement. Kids staying in school, kids doing well at school, even in homes where parents are not highly educated. So we kind of view 20 as that minimum threshold, but only 4% of adults in South Africa live in a home that meets that threshold. So we have a long way to go. We only have 7% of people checking out books at libraries, and 3/4 of people are not going at all. Another key behavior we want to see as a campaign is we want adults to be reading aloud daily to the children in their lives, and starting from when those kids are babies. And we're only seeing about 15% of the adults who live with children reporting that they read aloud more than once a week, which we would consider a very bare minimum of the level of behavior that we'd like to see. So this for us is a big outcome that we're always driving towards, and there's a long way to go. And the result, one of a survey that came out, it's a couple of years old now, but is that basically 4 in 5 children in grade 4 can't read for meaning in any language. And those results have been further analyzed, and it's a little more complex, but at a high level, children are not reading for meaning in grade 4. And if you can't read for meaning by grade 4, you're not going to be able to do well in any of the subjects going forward. It really is the foundation for all learning. So I'm sure people on this talk are already well aware of the problems. But what I do want to then highlight is the COVID-19, just like it has all around the world, has just exacerbated the situation, and it's getting much worse. So in South Africa, there was a recent survey that came out, the NIDS-CRAM household surveys that have been done 4 times throughout the pandemic to assess what's going on, and it focused on education. There's an estimate that dropout has tripled due to COVID-19. The number of children receiving school meals has significantly dropped. It's less than half. It used to be 2/3. And a lot of this is because of the rotational system. A lot of schools are still only sending children to school 2 days a week, 1 day a week, and the rest of that time they are, in theory, learning at home. And we know that in any household, and particularly in poor households, that's really going to have a negative impact. So we are seeing that children last year probably learned up to 75% less than they would have in a previous year. And what they were learning before COVID already was having people on the back foot. So we're really struggling with this. And I think for me, what that means for us as a campaign is that our focus on everything that happens outside of the classroom is more important than ever. Because if children are spending less time in the classroom in the majority of schools, and that time in the classroom is so wholly focused on catching up in the curriculum, all of these other inputs that support children's reading development are even more critical. So from there, I'd like to share a bit about the Nalibali Supplement and how this innovative resource is working to address some of those problems. So it's a 16-page newspaper insert. So it's printed on newsprint. It's thin, it's very inexpensive. This has been running since 2012. It's full color and it's fully bilingual. So all of the content is always in 2 languages, English and one of the other South African languages. And it's really designed to be an all-in-one resource. So it's something that a teacher could use to support and guide activities in school. It's something you could use to run a reading club, an extracurricular activity for children in an aftercare program or on the weekend, at your church, in your neighborhood. And it's also something a parent could use with a child in the home. So it's really designed to all hang together, and I'll unpack each of those pieces and how they work together. But it's also very inexpensive, and I think this is part of what makes it very disruptive and very innovative. So at the moment, it costs us about, well, in South African terms, R1.85. It's about 9.3 rupees, according to Google, when I converted it, or about 13 US cents to produce one of these 16-page, full-on broadsheets. And each one has 3 stories inside. So that means it's about 3 rupees a story, or 4 cents US per story. So it really is quite an affordable product. The most popular feature inside of the supplement is the cut out and keep storybook. So you can see here in this picture, the children are actually making them. You fold it, you cut around the edge, and then children have their own small book. There are 2 in every edition, and we look for a mix of stories that are good for different age groups. So usually one would be a much shorter story, few words on a page, targeted for younger children. One might be a longer story with a bit more of a narrative, more words. And it's really designed for children to own. And I think this is one of the things that really sets this innovation apart. What we've also found is that the actual folding and cutting is a really important part of the experience, because often children, we've observed more in the qualitative research, they feel quite alienated from books. If your classroom only has 20 books and they're in the corner and nobody can take them home because we don't want to lose them, they mustn't get dirty, children really don't feel like this is for me, and they don't really feel free to pick up and handle books whenever they want. But these supplement books, because they're newspaper, they're not so precious, and the child made it themselves. So that sense of ownership is much stronger. And children are free to go and read it whenever they'd like to. So that's some of the feedback we've received about what's quite positive about the newsprint. And interestingly, early on, the Department of Basic Education was quite critical. It was, oh, we don't want newspaper in our schools. It's cheap. It's not good enough. We want real books. And I understand that. And I think all children deserve to have and should have many real physical books in the languages they speak, high quality. But we have a crisis. So just as we're working in one stream to get more books into children's hands, we need ways to do that as cheaply as possible in the meantime or in parallel. And I think once our partners at DBE started to see how well these were used in schools, they've really come around to the idea that this is a very valuable resource as part of a broader strategy to support literacy development. So it's really designed for children to build their own personal library. And because we have 10 editions a year and each edition has 2 stories, by the end of the year, if your child and your school had a subscription or your reading club had a subscription, you would end up with those 20 books that you own in your own home. So really driving towards that bare minimum threshold of 20 books in the home. And it really then gives children an opportunity to choose what they want to read, which is such a key precondition and determining factor in whether a child is really going to become a reader. It's that discernment, that deciding, I like this story more than that one. I loved that one. It was funny. I want to read it again. That's really critical in how children develop as readers and develop that motivation to read independently, which further consolidates their skills, that virtuous cycle. So for us, that's really, really critical. And as I mentioned, every edition has a range of content. So you'd end up with simple stories, longer stories, but even the same child needs a range of stories. I think sometimes we get stuck in this leveling concept. So we don't level our stories, because if you've got a 7-year-old, maybe they're able to read a simple story, but they'd be able to listen to a longer, more complex story. And both that listening to read aloud and the engagement directly with text are both really key pieces of a child's literacy development. So we also have these longer story corner stories. You can see them in the front left corner of this picture here. And where do we get our content? So we have a couple different ways of doing this, but that's also a big part of the innovation. We work closely with publishers, South African publishers, and we have several publishing partners who allow us to use their stories for free, and we help them to reach a broader audience. And we love that these publishers have been wise enough to realize that we're not competing with them for business. The people that would have bought their books are not the same people that Nalibali is distributing the free reading supplement to. And it's a long game, because if you help to develop a generation of readers, when those people are older, they will be buying your books. And it is better as a whole for newspapers, for publishers. So we do have publishers donate stories. We cover the cost of the translation and the printing and the editing for the abridging. We also use lots of Creative Commons licensed stories. We have a wonderful South African publisher, Book Dash. All of their stuff is open source and donated by creatives and writers. And then we have a new stream where we're doing story donations. We've invited members of the public to write and submit their own stories. We're trying to elevate emerging authors and to get more stories that are originated in African languages. And then we very carefully vet the quality to make sure that everything going into the supplement really is of excellent quality. Every edition also has tips and information. So it's targeted for parents and caregivers, for teachers, for preschool teachers, for librarians, for youth volunteers running community programs. And every edition would have a theme. So it might be about mother tongue, or how to get male role models more involved in reading, or how to use family stories as a way of supporting children's literacy development, or why it's important to read from babies and all the way up. And really just trying to build people's knowledge and expertise over time, bit by bit, so that they become a more informed and empowered reading activist by engaging with this content. We also put in things like posters that you could put up in a reading club or a school. And there's always activities to go with the stories, because people need guidance. They need some structure. So there will always be activities that go with each story that's included in the supplement that adults can facilitate. They fund literacy development activities. We're not testing kids' knowledge. We're looking for creative ways to extend the story and have them apply different skills, writing skills, memory skills, critical thinking, questions to get their mind going. We also have activities that the children can do independently. And finally, we have news from the Nalibali Network. So I think one of the things that's really important to us is building the sense for everyone who receives this supplement across the country that you're part of a much bigger thing. You're part of something bigger than yourself. You're part of a movement. So here we would interview authors and illustrators. We would get celebrities to do little spots. We would invite people to send their stories. We would invite people to enter competitions, information about how to celebrate upcoming events in the literacy calendar. So this is really meant to draw people together. And if you're a librarian working in an isolated way in a small town, or maybe you're a stay-at-home parent trying to work with your kid, you can feel really alone in this. So people do what they see. So if we are modeling that all across the country, there's people engaged in this culture of reading, driving it forward, doing volunteering, all of these things, we're inspiring a lot of other people to come along with us. So how do we distribute? And distribution is also a huge part of the innovation, and probably the most challenging part. This was a surprise to me when I got involved with the campaign, is actually, it's not that hard to produce this resource, although a lot goes into it. But getting it out there is definitely the trickiest part. At the moment, the distribution channels we are using, we work with community newspapers in 6 provinces. So these are newspapers that are free to the recipient, because we don't want there to be any cost barrier to accessing the supplement. And so we're distributing about 200,000 copies a month. We work with post offices across the country. This is a brilliant partnership, because the post office covers the cost of delivery to all of its branches across the country. We just have to get the materials to their central depot. And it's really a brilliant example of a sort of public-private partnership, and seeing big national networks come on board to support that broader goal of literacy. So we're distributing about 70,000 copies through post offices. Some are for the general public. Here's 20 copies you can give out when you see kids coming into the branch. And then most of them are for specific reading clubs and partner organizations that have requested a subscription to support their work throughout the year. We do direct delivery when funding is available. So we have a number of special projects around the country with dedicated funding. And then we also upload all of the supplements onto our 0-rated website. So it's no data is required if you're on a South African SIM card to access this. It is free. And just there in the bubble on the side, it's just showing the scope of what we've done over the last 9 and a bit years. We've distributed 44.4 million copies of the Nalibali supplement. with 115 million stories inside. And that is something we're very proud of. And it's still not quite meeting the needs. We're still quite far off from that. But with more resources, it would be very, very easy to scale this up. So we're doing about 300,000 copies a month right now. But we could easily do 1 million. We could easily do 2 million because the systems are in place. We would just need additional cash. So if anyone is listening who wants to support this, give us a shout. But I think over time, we started wondering, we'd received a lot of wonderful feedback anecdotally. We've been doing this for a few years. Oh, people love the supplements. Our school can't live without them. The kids are taking them home. But we also heard stories about the supplement being used to wrap fish or to start a fire, and we really weren't sure how to weight these different stories. Is it being used well most of the time, or is it often just being thrown away? Because we needed to make sure that a lot goes into this resource, producing it, printing it. We need to make sure it's landing where it needs to. Were newspapers the right place to be? We used to be in commercial newspapers that you have to buy. And we weren't sure if that was the right distribution channel to stick with in the long term. And is it designed well? I mean, do people actually find it useful? Do they want different stuff inside? Is it pitched correctly? Is it appealing? All of these things. So I won't go into the detail, but we did do an external evaluation in 2018. And we also did some internal evaluation looking at how the supplements were used in some of our projects. So I'll quickly share some of the findings. And if anyone wants more detail about the evaluations, they are on our website. You can download them on the research page, or you can reach out. Happy to talk about it more. But some of the things we learned is that, yes, our targeting really wasn't as good as it needed to be. So if we are trying to make sure that our reading resources are available to the people who need them the most, we found that actually the people who were getting the supplement were going to be more highly educated than the general population, less likely to be unemployed, and usually were already pretty aware about how important it is to read aloud to children. The external evaluation did a comparison between organizations running Nalibali programs who did get the reading supplement and organizations running Nalibali programs that did not. And we found that the ones receiving the supplement were often better resourced overall, which means something wasn't quite right in who was able to access and get on the subscription list. Something in that process needed to be improved so we could be more equitable and really reach those who needed it the most. But everybody wanted it. 97% of the reading clubs not getting the supplement said, oh, we desperately want this resource. So we did know the demand was high, and we did need to keep improving our targeting to get it out there. We also looked at the degree to which the supplement was used when it goes in a newspaper versus when it goes to an organization. And I mean, this is a lot of numbers, but at a high level, what we found is that the supplements in the newspaper, about 1 in 5 was being used, or 1 in 5 respondents said, yes, we're using it. Usually about 2.5 people were using it. So what that comes down to is for every 100 copies that we printed in a newspaper, 20 were being used by about 50 people, if we're just rounding. Versus when we gave them to the organizations and the reading clubs, 95% said, yes, we're using this. So we did want to target a bit better so we could get more of our resources to the people who really wanted them, who specifically requested them, wanted a subscription, and said, this is where I'm going to use it, in my preschool, in my reading club. But we were very encouraged to see that a lot of the reading behaviors that we are trying to spark and support and change as a campaign were reported at very high rates. So when people are using the supplement, they are using it in the ways that we intend. And that was a very positive thing. Adults are reading aloud to children. Children are reading on their own independently. And children are taking it home and building those personal collections, which again is such a critical outcome for us. Another really interesting finding that came more out of the qualitative research, we went to schools where a program that we were running had provided both books in these hanging libraries that you see in the photo and had provided supplements. And we found that the supplements were just much more likely to end up in children's hands and homes. So books were very appreciated, but we had these hanging libraries and the design was meant to allow them to move around between classrooms, to go to a reading club, go outside, set them up. And they really weren't moving around as much as we'd hoped, and they were not always well used. So I would show up at a school for these research trips, and people would say, look at these beautiful books, we've taken such good care of them. And they'd be so proud that the books were still in good condition. And I would see the book 7 months into the program, 10 months into the program, looking pristine. And it just made me sad. I said, not enough children have been handling this book. No one's been allowed to take this book home. It shouldn't look so clean at this point. It really should be loved and touched and a little bit dog-eared. And that's what we want to see versus the supplements. This picture on the right, I don't know if you guys can see on your screens, but children have actually, written things on the front. They've put their names, they've changed the title of the book. And I think what we found is that teachers really weren't afraid to ruin or lose the supplement because more are coming next month. It's not such a precious resource. So children can use it, children can take it home. And parents also, we got some anecdotal feedback that it helped parents to be more involved with children's education because of the joint activity you can do together, making the book, and also because of being in African languages and allowing parents to get involved in that way. And there were just some really innovative, we saw so many innovative ways of using this resource through the research trips that we've done. This was a school that didn't have a library. They had a room, but they were saving money for bookshelves, and they created these bookshelves out of paper so they could display the supplement and children could come in and read it in that room. This was a school I visited on a research trip, and because there were visitors from the big city, they had to do a presentation, and the children showed off their reading and storytelling, and it went on for quite a long time. But I noticed as I looked around that all the children, they were getting bored. So they started to reach into their backpacks and pull out these bags, these bread bags full of Nalibali cut out and keep books from the supplement. And I saw them pull out their stack and kind of rifle through. No, I don't want that one. No. Where's that one I liked? This is what I want to read. And they were kind of sitting around the presentation. You probably can't see in that picture, but quite a few of the kids are just pulled out books and they're just reading while their classmate is telling a story. And for me, that was the incredible indicator of success to witness, was these children have their own personal collections. They carry it around with them. They can access books whenever they want to. They choose to read when they have the opportunity. And they're discerning readers. They're starting to see what they like and don't like and make those choices. So that was a brilliant outcome to see. And because it's an inexpensive resource, this is what makes it possible for children to have those personal libraries. This was another reading club that I visited, and it was in this beautiful children's room in a library, tons and tons of books in the local languages. And I asked, do these children check out a book every time they come to the reading club? Because what a brilliant opportunity. And the reading club facilitator said, most of them don't have library memberships, so they don't really take books home. The library memberships cost money. The parents have to come with proof of address. They don't have time. They're working. They don't have the documents. That was really sad. And on a policy level, that's a whole different area work stream that we've been working on at Nalibali around library access. But the supplement was something that these kids could take home from the reading club. And they could also all follow along as the story was being shared. I've pretty much talked about this. I'm going to skip this slide. Basically, we found out this is a really effective resource in all these different ways. It's very cost effective, but we really needed to improve our targeting. And we did make a few tweaks to the format based on the outcomes of those evaluations. So how have we applied the findings? We switched from newspapers that people have to buy into community newspapers because it was cheaper or free to the end user. Some of those papers are in African languages, which is well aligned with our values. And we also did a sort of a quick dipstick evaluation when we piloted this that showed higher use rates of the newspaper in these community papers than we had seen in the commercial papers. We've streamlined the sign-up process for reading clubs and NGO partners and really tried to make that commitment that if you are registering and committing to use the resource, and if you're willing to go pick them up at a central location at a post office, then we will get them to you. We're not going to have so many barriers and really trying to expedite that process. So we've been able to add, I think we had 58 partners on the list at the beginning of this year, and now we have more than 950 reading clubs and organizations across the country who are receiving supplement subscriptions. With our distribution in the post office, saved us a lot of money. So we're now in a third of the post offices nationwide. So we're able to start saying to the general public, hey, do you want Nalibali resources? Go to your local post office. Visit our website for a list of post offices that carry the supplement. And that's a big breakthrough in just being much more readily accessible to a parent, to a random person who might not be part of an NGO, but does want to get their hands on more reading materials for their kid. We're reusing more old content to increase cost effectiveness and bring the cost down. And we're also, as I mentioned, inviting emerging authors to donate stories as another way of saving costs and elevating our local emerging writers and illustrators. We have lots of dreams for this. We want to be in every post office in the country. We want to be in retailers. We'd love to be in supermarkets. Imagine that you're buying your groceries and you can just pick up a copy at the till, and maybe it costs 5 rupees or maybe it's free. We've done a few pilots with retailers, but we haven't had the commitment from those partners to get these pilots off the ground, take them to scale, or sustain them over time. But it is still something we're working on. We'd love to see government procurement for libraries. We'd love to see large companies distribute this as a perk. Hey, we have 4,000 employees, 2/3 of you are parents. Here's free reading material you can take home once a month with your children. We'd love to give things out on transportation networks. We've done a few pop-up activities like that. This was this year's World Read Aloud Day, where we were giving out a story to taxi commuters. And people were so excited. They said, I've heard Nalibali on the radio, but I've never held a physical story from you guys before. And I think that for us is just a reminder that there's a lot of innovation that can happen through digital platforms, but there is still a big role for print in a country like South Africa. And we need to be innovating in parallel. Innovation isn't switching away from print into digital. It's having a really innovative and accessible digital strategy, which again, I didn't talk about today, but is a big part of our work, and having a really innovative, accessible, and low-cost print strategy, because we need both of these to have a nation of readers. And we'd also, I didn't put this here, we'd love to see clinics passing out reading materials to new parents, to well child visits, so that the culture of reading is prescribed by community health workers. So these are some of our dreams and where we'd like all of this to go and what we're working towards. And finally, just to quickly touch on replication. So what would it take if someone listens to this and they say, oh my gosh, this is what we need in my context? Key things to consider would be, number one, where will you get the stories? I mentioned our different partnerships with publishers. There is a lot of Creative Commons content out there in the world. Language origination is also important. We are working to do more stories that were originally written in an African language, and then they get translated into English and other languages, because it is a challenge in multilingual publishing that you don't want to always take something that was first in English and then translate it. We actually want to be using things that were written in our local languages at the outset. So we're working towards doing more of that, and we are improving. Required skills and capacity, it's a really, doing this every month is there's so many things that go into it, managing the whole network of editors and translators and publishers and printing and the subscription list being updated. But multilingual publishing is a different beast than simply, oh, I did this in English and now I've translated it into Hindi or whatever. So it is a particular skill set. But I do think that in countries like India and South Africa, we are a multilingual context. We do have people with those skill sets. We just have to find them. Distribution channels, like I mentioned before, one of the biggest challenges. And it really has helped to get a partner like the Post Office on board. It really has helped that the community newspaper company we work with is absolutely mission aligned, and they're really working with us to keep costs as low as possible, and to be very flexible and adaptable in how we update the list to make sure we're meeting people's needs. Every edition, we're adding people, we're changing, and they're wonderful. You really need mission aligned partners. And, we're still working on this. We're still working to crack the retailers, the government partnerships. But that's sort of the make or break of whether you can do this successfully at scale and to keep costs down. And then, packaging and format. We do the 16-page newsprint. We've tried lots of other things over time. We did a glossy square magazine at one point, and it was lovely. People liked it, but we weren't able to include anywhere near as much content, and it cost quite a lot more to produce, which is why in the end, for our work at scale, we have stuck with the supplement format. I'm sure there's more I'm missing. And if you'd like to download the Nalibali supplement and check it out, you can visit our website, nalibali.org. I wish I had one right here to hold up, but because I am away from home right now visiting my family, I don't actually have one here. But you can see all of them on the website. I think we've got 178 past editions that should be available there. Quite a lot of material. Just to say thank you very much for having me, and hopefully that sparked some interesting thinking, and happy to take any questions or to have further chats afterwards with anyone keen to follow up.
Thank you, Katie, for that very very powerful presentation, and it's definitely triggered a lot of ideas. If when we when we look at the concept of the supplement, the amazing partnerships that Nalibali has developed, and the idea of actually making it reach to the very last child, and the innovative methods that you use, it is quite amazing. So thank you so much for sharing these
Thank
amazing
you.
ideas. And of course, there are like a lot of questions that I have in my mind, and we'll also take some from our audience as well. But to start with, when you're talking about the one very important aspect of these supplements are to do with uh, you know kinesthetic kind of activities, right? Like there are cutouts, you have to there are activities, parents get involved, so a lot of focus is on activities as well. At this point of time, like you mentioned, that there is like many schools are closed or are working on rotational basis, etc. What has been like the main focus of Nalibali in terms of you mentioned schools, you mentioned homes, and different different settings like retailers, etc. What is the at present time? What would be the main focus in terms of outreach for the newsletters?
I think this year our big drive. So last year during the hard lockdown in South Africa, we'd been distributing to lots of reading clubs, but they all had to stop running due to all the COVID restrictions. So at that time, we went and tried to find organizations that were still reaching households. So food relief organizations, large NGOs that still had some contact with families. There were a lot of people giving out food parcels at that point. So we said, great, can we distribute our reading materials in the food parcels just to make sure they're still getting to children? So last year, we were focused on working with a small number of large organizations that could still reach children and households directly, despite all of the COVID restrictions and the school closures for several months. This year, as people started to get more active again, starting reading groups, schools being back, even though it's still running in this sort of limited way, we came back to that commitment we'd made from the research of accessibility, saying, if you want the supplement, we want to meet the need until we run out of budget. And really building the simple form people need to fill in online to register a reading club or as a partner. If you're motivating for more than a certain number of copies, more than 200, we need to understand and vet whether we can manage that or not. But typically people just ask for what they need. I've got 16 kids. Can I have 16 copies in these languages? And we're just really trying to be as responsive as possible. And the reason we can afford to reach many more people is because we shifted everyone to the post office. So we used to do a lot more direct delivery. And I think this is a key learning. Newspapers have the capacity to run around and deliver to direct addresses because they have these distribution trucks, but it's a lot more expensive. And so in asking everyone, saying, we can give you this thing for free, it's very valuable. What you need to do is go pick it up at your local post office, like any other parcel that you might receive. That's really enabled us to scale up and reach a lot more organizations and reading clubs while keeping down and being more cost effective. Sorry, I think I lost you for a second. Am I still here?
Yes, yes. I think towards the end
Okay,
you were
sorry
talking
for
about post of the this idea of just going to your local post office and picking up these wonderful supplements, and that really makes the post office an interesting place in itself. I mean, generally. I mean, when we look at post offices in India, it's more like a transactional place, but it seems like has it kind of actually like it must have changed the environment the post office looks like, because children are going there.
I mean, I don't know that it's changed the environment. I think because it's not a huge scale as far as how many people per branch would be coming in to grab it. But I do think post offices are very transactional places for us as well. But one thing about the post office is that they have a mandate. They have to be accessible. They have to be within X number of kilometers of every community in the country. So even very small towns will have a post office, or they'll be able to reach one. I'm not saying it's always easy. If you have no transport money, that can be a barrier. But it is an existing network. And so what we really try to do is, dear, I'm stuck again. Okay, I hope I'm still connected. We try to layer our work on existing institutions rather than duplicate and build new systems and new infrastructure. And what's been great about the post office is that our partners there are very responsive. So if we get a feedback from a small town that like, hey, my supplement didn't arrive, we escalate it, they track it down, they find it, they get it sent to the right place. Someone says, oh, my post office wanted a tracking number, but I don't have one. Then we communicate to that post office and clarify, there is no tracking number, this is what's going on. So I think what's also really important is just a really, really active engagement with our partner at the post office, troubleshooting every issue immediately as it arises. Oh no, I'm breaking up again. Troubleshooting every issue immediately as it arises and having that strong communication.
Right. Right, that's very interesting. Here, the second question is to do with this, this very interesting concept of having bilingual supplements, and we have a comment also from one of our audience members, Padma, who's saying that the idea of having English and a native language side by side is quite, something which she really appreciates. But it's very relevant for multilingual context, like you mentioned, South Africa, India, so many different languages, and people living together side by side. How does Nalibali decide as to how, where exactly does which language go in terms of bilingual, when we are talking about bilingual supplements? Is it a challenge in terms of deciding as to how much quantity goes into which region?
We decided to go in order of how widely the languages are spoken. So when we launched the campaign in 2012, we only had funding to do 2 editions. So we had isiZulu and isiXhosa as our first 2 languages because they had the largest numbers of home language speakers. Then we moved on to Afrikaans, which also has a very large population. Then we moved on to Sesotho, Setswana, Sepedi. So we've gone in order. There are 2 languages we haven't gotten to yet out of the 11. So we in 9 of the 11. We're hoping to get funding to extend to those languages as well. That's something we are fundraising for.
Right. And when we talk about cities where, in contexts like India, for example, we see that there are cities which have a lot of mixed, people speaking different languages, different mother tongues, living in the same locality. So, the kind of languages they have access to would be kind of very different. Whereas vis-a-vis rural areas where a large portion would have the same language being spoken. So is that a challenge which you guys also face in South Africa in terms of cities, or that's something which is not a major challenge?
No, it's absolutely a challenge. And the main place that we see it, although not exclusively, is in Gauteng, in Johannesburg, because that's a very, very, very multilingual environment. School might have children that speak 5 different languages at home or more. We also have a lot of people in Gauteng speaking languages even beyond our 11 national languages. We have lots of people who have immigrated from other African countries. And someday we'd also love to be able to have resources in the other languages that are spoken here that are not official languages. And next year for World Read Aloud Day, we will be producing some resources in other commonly spoken languages, which we're quite excited about. But yeah, it's a challenge. And, when I look at the distribution spreadsheet and I see this province, it's very clear, everything's Seswati, everything's Sepedi, everything's Setswana, and then you get to Gauteng. Oh shit, I think I just got disconnected there. You might see a reading club that's ordering in 6 different languages, 3 copies of this, 4 of that, 5 of that. But I guess what's really great about the way we've set it up is that we are able to provide what you need. We've got 9 languages, you make your order, and we will provide the languages that you need. And I think that's where having the right partners really comes in, because it is no easy feat when it comes to distribution and packaging to get, the different languages together in the right quantities. So that is definitely a challenge we have. I think the trickiest thing is not so much when we distribute to a partner because they place an order. I want this many in this language, this many in this language, great. But when we're deciding what to distribute in a public space, so this post office branch or that post office branch, it can be a bit trickier to know what languages people are going to want here. So we can look at the demographic data. We can look at what the reading clubs in that neighborhood order and just match the percentages, which is what we've done at the moment. But we've said to the post offices, give us feedback. If you want a different language, this is the email, this is the phone number. We can switch it. So we really do have to hear from people on the ground if we aren't providing the right language. We do have to, we were giving you something valuable. We need you to come and meet us halfway and help us to make sure it's as valuable as possible.
Right.
But it's tricky. I know India has even more languages than South Africa, but we have a lot of the same challenges and dynamics there.
Yes, that's a very interesting puzzle. In fact, that would be there for someone to address if they want to do something. What Nalibali is doing in multilingual contexts. You also made a point about making Nalibali, building the stories and the content of Nalibali through partnerships with publishers, with and it's great that you're giving a platform to young emerging authors as well, and giving them a platform for their stories as well. So it's really like a truly collaborative project. Talking about publishers, and this question is coming more from we had Kyle Zimmer from First Book to speak at one of the D Talks, and she talked about how a lot of publishers are actually like very commercial, and they cannot address a very large audience who cannot afford those books. But Nalibali is trying to make those stories, etc., accessible to the most underprivileged as well. What does it take? Is it difficult dealing with publishers for stories, convincing them to donate stories? And how do you go? How do you manage that conversation? Should I
Sorry,
repeat
could
my
you repeat it?
question?
It broke up for just a second. Yes, please.
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Sure. So my question was more to do with how does Nalibali kind of engage into partnerships with publishers who, of course, are often, a lot of them are not catering to the underprivileged sections or those who can't afford the books. Is it a difficult? I'm assuming it is a different challenge. But what is that one incentive which helps publishers to say that, okay, we are going to give our stories to Nalibali for the majority of children?
It's a good question, because it's always one of the things that is quite amazing about the model we're using. I think when Nalibali first started, it was a much smaller project run by an organization called PRISA, Project for Research of Alternative Education in South Africa, but they had really strong relationships with publishers already when we first kicked off this campaign, much more in its baby pilot stages, just testing out different ways of working. So those relationships and connections were, and that we just popped out again. The relationships with publishers were already there, and I think that really helped in setting them up. But I think you really have to have confidence in the value of what you're proposing, saying, what we can offer you as Nalibali. We're not asking you to give us something for free that we should pay for. We are offering you an audience of 300,000 readers, or more, because many times the supplement is used by more than one person per copy. So by allowing us to take a story that you might only have available in English and Afrikaans, abridge it, translate it, and distribute to 300,000 people across the country, that's a huge success for you as a publisher, because you're going to get your logo on the back. People will know you've participated. And if children go up loving the story that they first encountered in the Nalibali supplement, maybe one day when they have their own children and they're in a position to buy books, they can buy it for their own children. So again, it is a long game, but I think we have to have confidence that we're offering a strong value proposition, which is to reach a bunch of children who would not have bought this book otherwise and not have read the story otherwise, on a massive scale. And in the long run, your story is well known, it's more popular. That cannot have negative consequences for you as a publisher. It can only be positive.
Right. That's a very interesting. I mean, I would love to listen to one of the conversations that you're having with the publishers, because it's quite true that they are giving that you are giving that greater access to what they would see as a market, but it's actually giving them giving scaling up the joy for reading for a lot of more children as well from our end. Um, Another question that one of our audience members also spoke about is the digital versions as well. So I think there's a question that are there digital formats available? And I think you did answer that question. But just to add to this question, with of course greater adoption of digital technique, digital platforms, etc. And you didn't mention that there needs to be, in a way, the transformation is not from print to digital. Both have to go parallel. But in terms of this greater adoption of the digital by even families who might traditionally, or who might be more in the middle to low income brackets, but there is greater adoption of internet and digital platforms. What opportunities does that open up for initiatives like Nalibali?
No, digital is a huge part of our strategy, and I didn't talk about it very much today. And it became an even bigger part of what we do once COVID hit and lockdown came into place. And I think one of the, COVID has been terrible, but one of the positive outcomes to some degree is that a lot of people who maybe were uncomfortable with technology were really forced to become more comfortable, because for a while it was really the only way we could engage. I'm thinking of grandparents Skyping with their grandchildren, for example. But there is a lot more uptake of digital platforms now than we had 16, 18 months ago. And I do think that bodes well for the future. So all of the copies of the Nalibali supplement are available to download. They are just in a PDF format. You could print them out at home, you could read them on screen. But many of the stories in the supplement are also in our story archive in a much more screen-friendly format. And so I think we've got just over 1,000 stories across the 11 different languages up there. We also have a WhatsApp bot. So you can actually, if you add Nalibali on WhatsApp, and that should actually work from anywhere in the world as long as you're using the country code, and I can share the number with you afterwards. But it's you could add Nalibali as a WhatsApp contact, and if you just message stories, then we'll send you a menu saying, right, which language would you like to read stories in? Press 1 for English, 2 for Afrikaans. Pick your language. Then it gives you a bunch of options for stories. If none of those sound good, you can ask for more. So that's the best way of trying to reach people where they are on the platforms that they already use on a day-to-day basis and make stories even more accessible.
Right. That's lovely to know, and would absolutely love to sign up for this and also share it with the audience as well. Another question regarding digital, and I think this is more to understand your assessment of the larger structural issues, or like a more systemic issue in that sense, which is that with more digital and with more so much more content, audiovisual content available on the same device, right? And do you think that it poses a challenge to reading culture, to developing reading culture with, more and more children from a young age having a preference for audiovisual content? And does it pose a risk to the reading culture and to the goals of SDG 4 when we are talking about foundational literacy and numeracy?
Sorry,
I'll repeat my question. Right, I think some challenges with the internet, but I think it's quite phenomenal. It's quite phenomenal what Katie has shared today. I mean, some of these ideas with respect to like a full-fledged supplement for children that they have access to in their own languages, a bilingual language as well. So this is a challenge which this is a setting where we see that the medium of instruction in schools often is in one language, whereas their mother tongue is in a different language. So having bilingual supplements really helps add that aspect of learning two languages together as well. And that's what Katie was also mentioning. Katie, yeah, just to kind of repeat my question there, I was saying that
Cool. And I think
was
this
trying
probably
to.
has to be the last one, if that's all right, but go for it.
Yeah, sure. So I think in conclusion, I just wanted your thoughts on. Do you think that digital, with more access of digital audio, video kind of content, is that something which adds as puts a challenge to developing a reading culture among children, or do you think it is something which can also go well together?
I think, I know some people say, oh, digital is taking away from reading culture. There's other people that say, oh, we've got to be digital. We can't do print anymore. I'm a firm believer that you need both strategies and they need to go hand in hand. Because different things will work better for different children at different times, for different families at different times. So we're really driving to have excellent, high quality, free and cheap print resources everywhere, and to also have excellent, high quality digital resources that are easily accessible and people can access whatever works best for them.
On that note, Katie, thank you so much for being part of this session. I think you've
I'm
really
so sorry
triggered.
about all the tech difficulties. I do apologize for that. I hope you could hear most of the presentation.
We very well could, and you've triggered a lot of thoughts,
Okay.
ideas, and questions in our audience. Thank you once again for joining us, and thank you to all those who are also joining us live and who will be watching this video. We hope that this is something which will inspire all of us to actually continue in the journey of foundational literacy and numeracy for all children as well. So once again, thank you, Katie.